does it actually mean, linguistically speaking, in the language? What is the basic root meaning? The root meaning is through the word al-habas, which means restraint, to restrain oneself. And here والمراد به في الشرع حبس النفس على أمور ثلاثة. Right, so the linguistic meaning is to restrain. But what does it mean in the Sharia, in the legislation? What is meant by it is to restrain the soul from three things, or to restrain and to tie the soul in three things. They are al-awwal ala ta'atillah, the first in Allah's obedience, athani an maharimillah, the second is to keep it away from the prohibitions of Allah, athalith ala aqdarillahi al-mu'lima, and the third is to restrain it in relation to the decrees of Allah which cause pain or harm. The decrees that come to you and they are dislikable and they cause pain or harm. The Sheikh says, هذه أنواع الصبر التي ذكرها أهل العلم, and then he goes on to explain each of the three in a slight bit more detail. So he says, as for the first, الأمر الأول أن يصبر الإنسان على طاعة الله, that a person is patient upon Allah's obedience, because he says obedience, because it involves physical effort, then it is hard, it is burdensome upon the soul, and it becomes difficult upon a person, and that's why the Shaykh goes on to say it's heavy upon the body. There is al-ajaz wa ta'ab, so you feel tired, you feel sometimes incapable, maybe you don't have the physical, you maybe you're tired and it's time for the prayer or something. So here there's ta'ab and there's ajaz and things like that. And also وكذلك أيضا يكون فيه مشقة من الناحية المالية. Likewise, when it comes to wealth, because worship is in terms of wealth as well, and people feel some hardship or difficulty, such as the issue of zakah and the issue of hajj. And so in general, the obedience, the acts of obedience, whether they are in relation to the body, the nafs and the badan, or whether they are in relation to the wealth. So what do they require? They require فَتَحْتَاجُ إِلَى صَبْرٍ وَإِلَى مُعَانَاتٍ. So it requires patience, but also undergoing hardship. You have to go through some degree of hardship. And that's why the Shaykh then goes on to quote the ayah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اصْبِرُوا وَالصَّابِرُوا وَالرَّابِطُوا. O you who believe, show patience, then endure patience, and then guard the territory. Right? So these three, the meanings of these three, inshallah, we'll look at them shortly, but they're all connected. First one is to have patience, then it is to endure patience, and then rabitu, here it has an additional meaning that follows on from the previous two. We'll look at that later, inshallah. Anyhow, this is the first affair, which is to have sabr in persisting upon the acts of obedience and to undergo whatever one needs to undergo of hardship, of burden, of toil, of struggle, of effort, of tiredness, of all those things, then the body and the soul, to undergo that for the purpose of obeying Allah. This is sabr. The second, al-amru thani, as-sabr an maharimillah, بحيث يكف الإنسان نفسه عما حرم الله عليه. Second is to have patience from the prohibitions of Allah, in the sense that a person withholds himself from Allah's prohibitions. Why? Because nafs is al-ammara bisu. Naturally, the soul is created in a way that it prompts an individual to do evil, it directs him towards evil. And so a person, he forces himself, فَيُصَبِّرْ الْإِنسَانُ نَفْسَهُ, he causes himself to have patience. And an example of this, the Shaykh says, like lying, for example, al-kadhib, wal-ghish fil mu'amalat, lying or deception in dealings that you have, like trade dealings. It's very easy. There are many instances where you know that you can get away with lying, or you believe that you will not be found out, or you know that the person you're lying to, it could be your parents, it could be your spouse, it could be anybody. You know that there is no way for anyone to find out that you actually lied, right? And the soul is calling you to that. And so you prevent yourself, and you fight against your soul, and you don't lie. And likewise, many instances where you have the ability to deceive somebody in a trade relationship or in some sort of mu'amala. Likewise, وأكل المال الباطل بالربا أو غيره. Likewise, you can consume someone's wealth in falsehood, either by way of riba, usury, or some other means, and the person wouldn't know. Um, all of these examples were وشرب الخمر والسرقة, right? Stealing, drinking alcohol, all of these things from the various types of disobedience. So a person, he restrains his soul from those things until he does not do them. And this also, obviously, this also requires a type of struggle and a type of withholding the soul. This is more of a struggle in the soul, a mental struggle, a struggle of the heart, and restraining oneself from obeying these prompts of the soul which prompt you to evil. As for the third, أما الأمر الثالث فهو الصبر على أقدار الله المؤلمة. It is to have patience upon those affairs from Allah's decree which cause pain, which are harmful. Because the Shaykh says the aqdar of Allah, the decrees of Allah upon a person, they are either mula'imah, or they are mu'limah. So the first one, mula'imah, are those things which are agreeable to a person. A person likes these things. They are likable. They bring him pleasure. They bring him joy. They bring him satisfaction. They bring him whatever it might be. This is al-mula'imah, meaning that the soul or these things are inclined towards. The soul is inclined towards them. And mu'lima, those which bring pain, which bring harm. So now each of these two things, so basically everything from Allah's decree is either they are affairs which are mula'imah or they are mu'lima. So let's take the first one, those things which are mula'imah. For example, food and drink. You eat food, you get pleasure from tasting and consuming the food. Drink, you have pleasure from the clothing that you wear and the things that you enjoy. All of these things, the scenery that you see, and all of the things that give you pleasure and joy and things like that. These are affairs from Allah's decree which are mula'ima. So with respect to these things, the Shaykh says al-mula'ima tahtaju ila shukr. These things require from us to be grateful to Allah. Right? So these types of decrees, they require from us to be grateful to Allah. And being grateful, shukr, is actually an act of worship, is ibadah. So therefore, this returns back to the first type of patience, which is patience upon Allah's obedience. Right? So in other words, all of those things which are from Allah's decree, which are likable, and a person is inclined towards them, which bring him joy, bring him pleasure, bring him benefit, bring him utility, and things like that, these things are responded to by way of shukr. And since shukr is itself is from ibadah, then these types of affairs from the decree of Allah take you back to the first type of patience, right? But the other one, which is the point of concern, or the issue that we are discussing here, is the affairs from the qadr of Allah which are mu'lima, meaning that they are dislikable and they are uncomfortable. They bring you harm, they bring you pain, they bring you loss, and so on and so forth. So these are mu'lima. The Shaykh says بحيث لا تلائم الإنسان تكون مؤلمة ويبتلى الإنسان في بدنه ويبتلى في ماله بفقده ويبتلى في أهله ويبتلى في مجتمعه, and so on and so forth. Right? He is tested through his body, which is illness and ailments. He's tested by way of his wealth, by it being lost or squandered or stolen, whatever it might be. Or he's tested with respect to his family, or he's tested with respect to the society he's in, and all other various types of trials. All of these, the Sheikh says, تحتاج إلى صبر ومعاناة فيصبر الإنسان نفسه عما يحرم عليه من إظهار الجزع باللسان أو بالقلب أو بالجوارح. Right? So basically, a person in relation to all these things, he restrains his soul, he forces it to be patient from doing those things which Allah has prohibited, right? From displaying like despair with the tongue and or feelings of the heart or with the limbs, doing things with the limbs. All of these things um, are prohibited. So once this is clear, that sabr, the meaning of sabr is restraint, and legislatively it means to restrain the soul, to tie the soul in relation to three things: Allah's obedience, Allah's prohibitions, keeping away from them, and patience upon the decrees of Allah which are not likable, to a servant. Now, from the servant's point of view, the way the servant can respond, there can be four levels of response to these affairs, right? Meaning to the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're speaking about specifically about the third type now, the decrees of Allah, which are dislikable. So the people are divided into four categories in terms of how they respond to what comes to them from the decrees of Allah. So the first one, al-halul ula, an yatasakhat. The first one is that a person becomes angry. He is angry at what has befallen from the decree of Allah. والحالة الثانية أن يصبر. The second is that he shows patience. والحال الثالثة أن يرضى. The third is that he is pleased. والحال الرابعة أن يشكر. And the fourth is that he is grateful. The Sheikh says that these are four states in which a person can be in one of these whenever a calamity befalls him. Sheikh goes on to explain each of these three. He says, أما الحال الأولى أن يتسخط إما بقلبه أو بلسانه أو بجوارحه. Right? So the first one is when a person becomes angry. He can do that either with his heart. So in the heart there is anger, there's resentment, there's something against the decree of Allah. أو بلسانه, or he expresses it verbally now. He expresses that dislike and that anger, that resentment verbally. أو بجوارحه, or it can be displayed by way of his limbs. So he says, for example, التسخط بالقلب, right? In the heart, it can be where his heart, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, he is angry towards his Lord, and it is as if Allah Azza wa Jal has wronged him by way of this calamity. Many people you see that they suffer a calamity, they suffer a hardship, and inwardly although they're not saying it, but they feel as if they are a victim. They feel as if they have been oppressed by Allah and they are a victim and that they didn't deserve this thing. And this is as we said, is prohibited. This is prohibited to even respond and to have this state or this feeling, to immediately feel as if somehow you're the victim of Allah's decrees or something. No, this is prohibited. As for وأما التسخط باللسان, this is when a person with the tongue, فأن يدعو بالليل بالويل والثبور. So basically he starts wailing and crying and for ruin and destruction and saying Ya wailah, and it makes all these phrases, or he reviles the time, what an evil week, or what an evil day it has been, or what an evil month it has been, and this and calamity after. So he starts reviling Allah and whatever is similar to that by way of his speech, right? This is what he's implying. Once again, that somehow he's been wronged and things like that. As for وَأَمَّا التَّسَخُّطُ بِالْجَوَارِحِ, by the limbs, it is, for example, when a person starts slapping his cheeks, or hitting his head with his hands, or starts pulling his hair out like this, or tearing the thobe, or things like this. All of this is prohibited. It's a sign of impatience, and it's a sign of a lack of firmness. The Sheikh says that this condition that you see when people behave like this, either in the heart or with the tongue or with the limbs, in the way the Sheikh described, this is this is the hal of the hali'een, Hali'een, these are the people who are like halu'. They are impatient. They are anxious. They are in despair. It's so these people are the ones who have clearly been prevented from the reward of showing patience, right? So they they were not saved from any calamity, right? So the calamity came to them, so they were afflicted by the calamity, and then on top of that, they earned sin on top of that. So now really it's two calamities. You've acquired two calamities. The calamity of the thing that came to you, whatever it might be, loss of, fear, hunger, loss of wealth, loss of life, loss of provision, or whatever it might be. So you've earned that a calamity has come to you. And then you've earned yourself an additional calamity by doing these things, which is now a musibah in the religion. So you had a musibah in the dunya, you've now added a musibah in the deen. You've added that yourself. And so um, this is not good at all. The second, so this is the first type of response that you see in some people who have weak iman and weak certainty, weak reliance, and so on and so forth. أما الحالة الثانية فالصبر على المصيبة. This is, you have patience where you restrain the soul, even though you might dislike the musibah. Okay, so now we need to distinguish between the first one and the second one, right? A believer does not have to be pleased with the maqdi or the maqdur, right? So we have to distinguish between the thing decreed and the act of decreeing. The act of decreeing, right? In the first one, that first person who feels somehow he's the victim, Allah's oppressed him, and so on and so forth, this person is finding fault with the action of Allah in decreeing the thing upon him, right? Allah decreeing the thing upon him, right? There's a difference between that and between you disliking the thing decreed, right? So, for example, a person can dislike illness, he can dislike loss of wealth. He doesn't like wealth being lost. He can, he can dislike death and things like that. All there's no issue. This is not unlawful for a person to dislike those things which are dislikable from the decrees of Allah. But we have to distinguish, as the scholars of the Muslims, as the scholars of the Sunnah explain, such as Ibn al-Qayyim discusses this, and Imam al-Sa'di discusses this, and others. They make a distinction between the qada and the maqdi, right? The qadar and the maqdur, right? The maqdur and the maqdi is the thing decreed. And the qada and the qadar is Allah's act of doing the decreeing. So whatever Allah decrees, there is wisdom in that. There is benefit in that, even if you cannot see it. There is justice in that. There's hikmah, there's adl, there's things like that. In everything that Allah decrees, meaning His act of decree, because He is doing so for a wisdom, and it is justice, and it is, so on and so forth. But as for the thing decreed, the maqdi and the maqdur, then a person doesn't have to like it, right? Because the soul is not, inclined towards things that bring harm to it from a worldly sense. So here, in relation to this, the Sheikh says a person, he does not. هو يكره المصيبة ولا يحبها ولا يحب أن وقعت لكن يصبر نفسه لا يتحدث باللسان بما يسخط الله. So he doesn't have to like the musibah. There's no obligation upon you to, yes, I have to be pleased with it, I have to like it. No, there's no obligation. You can dislike it from the angle that it is from the maqdi and the maqdur. But he does not love it, he does not like it, he's not happy that it happened, but he causes his soul to be patient. And he doesn't start speaking with the tongue, and nor does he do things with the limbs like we saw in the first example or in the first category, nor is there anything in his heart at all that somehow Allah has wronged him and he's the victim. And so therefore he is sabir. He's sabir, but he dislikes what happened. This is the second, right? So the first one dislikes what happened, dislikes, no problem, you dislike it, but then he dislikes that it was decreed upon him. He's angry with the decree of Allah. The second one, he's not angry with the decree of Allah. He knows it's from Allah. So he's having sabr because he knows Allah decreed it and Allah willed it, and so on and so forth. So he's forcing his soul with the restraint not to do things with the tongue, with the limbs, with the heart. But he doesn't like it. And he can do that. There's no fault or no sin for disliking something that occurs from the decrees of Allah. Now the third one, الحالة الثالثة, the Sheikh says الرضا بأن يكون الإنسان منشرحا صدره بهذه المصيبة. Right, the third one is actually pleasure. A person is pleased that, and his heart is open, that this calamity befell him. ويرضى بها رضاء تاما وكأنه لم يصب بها. Right, so this person, he's completely pleased with whatever happened. It's as if he wasn't afflicted with anything, right? So before the calamity came to him and the moment after the calamity happened to him, or the hour after or the day after, there's no change. Exactly the same. Before and after, it's as if nothing even happened to him. Why? Because he's pleased with the calamity, and he's pleased because of understanding, because of he understands the creed, and he understands that whatever Allah wills, it is beneficial for a servant. In all of the affairs of the servant there is good. So either he's grateful or he's patient, either whichever of the two. He meets all the decrees of Allah with this, and he's pleased. The third, والحال الرابعة الشكر, is gratitude. فيشكر الله عليها وكأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا رأى ما يكره قال الحمد لله على كل حال. The fourth state is that of being grateful. He's grateful to Allah for this thing that came to him, this dislikable thing from Al-Qadr. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw something that he disliked, he would say, Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. So he is being grateful to Allah. Alhamdulillah, saying Alhamdulillah. All praise is due to Allah, no matter what situation we might be in. So this shukr is, what's the reason for the shukr? The Shaykh goes on to explain. It's because Allah Azza wa Jal has, when a person shows patience upon a calamity, then Allah rewards that person with a reward that is much greater than the thing which afflicted him. That's why he's happy. That's why he's grateful to Allah. That's why the Sheikh says that it is mentioned by some of the female worshippers, the righteous female worshippers, that she was afflicted with something, some sort of injury or something on her finger, or loss of a finger or injury or something like that. So فحمدت الله, so she praised Allah على ذلك, for that. And so the people said to her, how are you praising Allah and you suffered this calamity? And whatever's happened to your fingers happened. She said, إن حلاوة أجرها أنستني مرارة صبرها. She said, indeed, the sweetness of the reward has made me forget the bitterness of the patience I had to show. Right? So the sweetness of the reward has caused me to forget the bitterness I had to go through for the patience in having patience over it. So then after this, so this is the introduction, really establishes the foundations of sabr, the various. So what do we have? We have the things in relation to which sabr is shown, which is obedience to Allah and keeping away from the prohibitions of Allah, and then the aqdar of Allah, the decrees of Allah, which is either being having shukr, showing shukr, being grateful for the things that are likable, or having patience for the things which are dislikable, right? Then, in relation to the individual, the person, in how he responds to the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is of four levels: the one who is angered, the one who is patient, the one who is pleased, and then the one who actually shows gratitude, who is actually grateful. So now the Shaykh goes on to look at the ayat that were brought by Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. So he says ثم ساق المؤلف رحمه الله تعالى الآيات التي فيها الحث على الصبر والثناء على فاعليه.